Have you ever wished that you could go back in time and tell your younger self a few important life lessons? Well, today's video explores the advice that older generations wished they had known earlier, wisdom that's often gained through years of experience, mistakes, and growth. These life lessons can help us avoid common pitfalls and guide us toward more peaceful, fulfilling lives. Welcome to Buddhist Motivation, a channel dedicated to helping you unlock the wisdom within and live a more mindful, balanced life through the teachings of Buddhism and motivational advice. I'm here to share insights that can empower you to live your best life with purpose and peace. As we dive into today's topic, I want to highlight that the lessons shared in this video come from deep reflection on both personal experience and the profound wisdom found in Buddhist philosophy. As someone who believes in the power of mindful living, I find that these teachings resonate with many of the Buddhist principles, such as self-awareness, non-attachment, and forgiveness. The advice we'll explore today is truly valuable for those who seek not only practical wisdom, but also spiritual guidance to navigate life's challenges. Before we get into the story, please take a moment to help support this channel by liking this video and subscribing. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback is what motivates me to create even more insightful content. Let's get started. 1. When to stop being good to the wrong people. In life, we often go out of our way to help others, sometimes at the expense of our own well-being. But in Buddhism, there is a deep understanding of attachment. And one of the greatest attachments we can have is to relationships that are not reciprocal. The Buddha teaches us that kindness should not be wasted on those who do not appreciate it, for it only leads to suffering. A profound Buddhist example comes from the Buddha's interactions with his cousin, Devadatta. Despite the many times Devadatta tried to harm the Buddha always showed compassion. However, he also knew when to distance himself. The lesson here is that true compassion doesn't mean endlessly offering kindness to those who exploit it, but knowing when to let go for the sake of inner peace. In everyday life, we may have friendships or family members who continually take without giving in return. We might feel obligated to help them because of the bond we share. But Buddhist teachings encourage us to practice discernment. If someone's behavior is toxic and draining, it's okay to walk away. Letting go of the attachment to these harmful relationships is crucial for our own spiritual growth. 2. You can't change someone who doesn't see a problem. The Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of self-awareness and right understanding. In life, we often try to change people, but Buddhism teaches us that true transformation begins with an awareness of one's own shortcomings. If someone is not ready to acknowledge their flaws, no external influence can change them. An insightful example comes from the story of the Buddha and Angulimala, a notorious murderer who had no intention of changing. The Buddha did not try to force change upon him. Instead, the Buddha's compassion led Angulimala to recognize the wrongness of his actions. True change happens when someone accepts their responsibility. But forcing change on someone who is not yet ready only leads to frustration. In our own lives, we might struggle with trying to change the behavior of a friend or partner. But the Buddhist path teaches us that real change happens only when the individual becomes self-aware. As much as we want to help others, we cannot force them to see the truth. They must come to that understanding on their own. 3. The greatest thing you can give yourself is freedom from what others think. Buddhism teaches us that attachment to the opinions of others is one of the most significant causes of suffering. We live in a world where we are constantly judged, whether by society, family, or friends. But the Buddha's wisdom tells us that we are not bound by others' perceptions of us. The greatest freedom is living authentically, without being shackled by the need for approval. The Buddha's renunciation of his royal life is a powerful example of living free from societal expectations. He left behind a life of luxury to seek inner peace because he realized that his happiness and peace didn't depend on the opinions of others. Similarly, we can reflect on how much of our lives are shaped by the expectations of those around us. By letting go of the need for validation, we create space to live more authentically. In our everyday lives, we might find ourselves constantly seeking approval, or worrying about what others think of us. Buddhist teachings encourage us to practice self-compassion and focus on our internal sense of worth rather than external validation. This will help us cultivate true freedom and inner peace. 4. Cleanliness and self-respect. Buddhism places a strong emphasis on mindfulness in every aspect of life, including how we care for our surroundings. Cleanliness, both physical and mental, is a form of mindfulness. The Buddha's teachings encourage simplicity and order, as these create a harmonious environment that fosters inner peace and clarity. A key story in Buddhism is that of the monk who kept his living space clean and orderly. This act wasn't just about appearance. It was a reflection of his commitment to mindfulness. When our external environment is orderly, it can help calm our minds. On the other hand, a cluttered environment can lead to mental chaos. In our daily lives, we can practice mindfulness through the simple act of keeping our surroundings clean and organized. This doesn't just mean tidying up, it also means making our space conducive to inner peace and reflection. When we respect our environment, we show respect for ourselves and our own well-being. 5. Walking away from the wrong people. The Buddha often spoke of the importance of discernment. Recognizing when a relationship, situation, or environment is no longer serving you is key to spiritual growth. Walking away from the wrong people doesn't mean abandoning them, it means choosing peace over conflict and self-care over toxicity. The Buddha's story of renouncing his royal life is a perfect example. Despite the love and attachment he had for his family, he recognized that his spiritual path required him to walk away from the worldly attachments that no longer supported his goal of enlightenment. He left behind what was comfortable for what was necessary. In our own lives, we may find ourselves in relationships or environments that no longer serve us. We might feel guilt or obligation to stay. But Buddhist teachings tell us that walking away can be an act of wisdom and compassion. By walking away, we are allowing ourselves and the other person the space for growth. 6. The importance of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a cornerstone of Buddhist practice. Holding on to grudges and resentment binds us to suffering. The Buddha teaches that when we forgive, we release ourselves from the grip of anger and hatred, which in turn frees us to live with peace and compassion. A powerful story in Buddhist tradition involves a man named Angulimala, a feared murderer who was forgiven by the Buddha. Despite his horrific past, the Buddha forgave him and showed him compassion, which ultimately led Angulimala to change his ways. This act of forgiveness didn't excuse his actions, but it freed both the Buddha and Angulimala from the cycle of suffering. In our own lives, we might find it difficult to forgive someone who has wronged us. But Buddhism teaches that forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior. It's about letting go of the negative emotions that bind us to the past. Through forgiveness, we not only heal ourselves, but also create space for compassion and growth. 7. Recognizing the need to change yourself. Buddhism teaches that true change begins within. We often try to change the people around us, but real transformation occurs when we focus on our own actions, attitudes, and mindsets. The practice of mindfulness allows us to look inward and identify areas where we need to change. The Buddha's path to enlightenment was not about changing others, but about transforming himself. He faced his own fears, desires, and attachments, and through this self-awareness, he achieved liberation. Similarly, we must practice self-reflection and recognize when we need to make changes in our own lives, in our personal relationships or at work. We might often try to change those around us. However, Buddhism teaches us that by changing ourselves first, our attitudes, behaviors, and responses, we can create healthier environments and relationships. 8. The power of apologizing and forgiving. The Buddha taught that both apologies and forgiveness are essential for personal and relational healing. When we apologize, we acknowledge our mistakes and take responsibility. When we forgive, we release ourselves from anger, bitterness, and resentment. His practices help us cultivate peace and harmony in our lives. A well-known Buddhist story involves a monk who had wronged a fellow monk. Instead of letting the grudge linger, the monk humbly apologized, demonstrating the importance of owning up to our mistakes. Similarly, forgiveness requires strength, not weakness, because it takes courage to release the emotional burden of resentment. In our lives, we may find it difficult to apologize or forgive, especially when we feel wronged. But Buddhism teaches us that both of these actions are essential for our emotional and spiritual well-being. Apologizing and forgiving are not just for the other person. They are gifts we give ourselves. 9. The strength to walk away. Knowing when to walk away from situations that drain us or hold us back is one of the most empowering choices we can make. Buddhism teaches that attachment leads to suffering, and sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is to let go of people or situations that no longer serve our higher purpose. The Buddha's own decision to leave behind his royal life and family is the ultimate example of walking away from attachment. He recognized that his true path to enlightenment required him to detach from the comfort of worldly possessions. Similarly, when we find ourselves in toxic or unfulfilling situations, walking away can be an act of courage and self-care. In everyday life, we often stay in situations because we fear change or the unknown. But Buddhism teaches us that attachment to anything, whether it's a job, a relationship, or even an idea, creates suffering. Walking away, when necessary, is a powerful act of reclaiming our peace and pursuing our true path. 10. Letting go of what doesn't serve you. Buddhism teaches that attachment to people, things, and outcomes causes suffering. True freedom comes when we let go of what no longer serves us. This could mean letting go of a toxic relationship, an unfulfilling job, or even outdated beliefs that hinder our growth. The Buddha's teachings on impermanence, anicca, remind us that everything in life is transient. By holding on to things that no longer serve our well-being, we prevent ourselves from experiencing the freedom and peace that come with letting go. The practice of detachment doesn't mean giving up, but rather recognizing when something is no longer beneficial. In our own lives, we may be holding on to past relationships, jobs, or mindsets that no longer align with our current values. Buddhism encourages us to practice mindfulness and let go of these attachments, making space for new opportunities and personal growth. 11. Patience and acceptance. Patience and acceptance are two of the most important virtues in Buddhism. The Buddha taught that everything is impermanent and change is inevitable. By accepting this, we can find peace even in the most difficult situations. Patience helps us endure hardship without becoming frustrated or angry. One famous story in Buddhist literature is that of the Buddha's years of meditation under the Bodhi tree. After struggling with different teachers and ways of seeking enlightenment, the Buddha finally found peace by practicing patience and accepting his path. This acceptance allowed him to reach the profound realization of enlightenment. In our own lives, we often struggle with impatience, whether waiting for success, healing, or change. But Buddhism teaches us to trust the process and embrace patience, knowing that everything unfolds in its own time. By accepting the present moment, we create the space for growth and transformation. Conclusion. As we wrap up this video, I hope that these life lessons have resonated with you, and that you're able to reflect on how they can guide your journey moving forward. Remember, life isn't about avoiding mistakes, but about learning and growing from them. And these insights offer us the opportunity to live with greater wisdom, compassion, and clarity. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to hear how these lessons have impacted your life, and whether you agree with the advice shared today. Your participation is what inspires me to keep creating more valuable content. And remember, this journey is ongoing. Make sure to stay tuned for the next video, where we'll dive deeper into more meaningful and motivating topics. Together, let's keep learning, growing, and living a life full of purpose. Thank you for being part of the Buddhist Motivation community, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.